The Thief is one of the strongest vocations in Dragon's Dogma 2, being capable of dealing tons of damage, all the while having tons of mobility options, and even becoming invincible for a pretty long time. And so in today's video, not only do I want to show you the build that I'm running on my Thief, what I believe to be the best equipment, augments and skills, but I will also be showing you how you can obtain the Secret Maister Skills for the Thief that you can actually get very early on into your playthrough. So with that out of the way, hello everyone, my name is Dark Hero and let's get started. Now let's take a look at the Thief weapon skills, and I'll be telling you which ones I believe are good and not so good. And let's start with Cutting Wind. This skill is a gap closer that can also be used to deal plenty of damage, as you can slice through multiple enemies and hit them multiple times. It's great at closing that gap quickly and also deal damage, but given that the Thief already has a dash, and as you will see, the Thief has a lot of very powerful skills, so I personally dislike taking a skill slot to use this. Next up is Ignited Flames, which is a quick way for you to be able to gain the fire elemental affinity while still dealing some damage. Given how powerful and common having a mage is in your party, and with them being able to grant you several different boons, I personally do not recommend having this skill, although it can be nice to have the fire element with this skill and then have the mage cover for your other elements. The next skill is Shadow Veil, which allows you to cloak yourself and become harder to detect. You can use this to be able to reach a destination without being spotted by enemies or having to deal with them, but in combat it's not that great, especially as you are actively going to be losing stamina. You can use this to get in close to an enemy and deliver a critical attack, but other than that it's not that great, and as you will see, the Thief does have a skill that allows you to do that more easily and is a lot more practical, so I would not recommend that you use the Shadow Veil. Up next we have the iconic Skull Splitter, one of the very best skills in Dragon's Dogma 1, and I'm happy to report that it is amazing in Dragon's Dogma 2 as well. You can use this to easily reach the enemy's weak spot as you come crushing down, dealing tons of damage as you spin. And of course, the higher you perform this attack, the more damage you'll be able to deal. I absolutely love this skill, and being able to occasionally dodge attacks with this as well makes it one of the very best Thief skills in my opinion, and I always have it on my build. The next skill is going to be Powder Blast, which allows the Thief to plant an explosive charge that you can detonate at any moment. Additionally, you can cling on to larger enemies and also plant the explosive charge on them. And with this skill dealing tons of knockback damage, you can easily make it so that a large enemy is going to fall down if you use this at the right time. I like this skill a lot, but I don't end up using it very often because the downtime of having to plant it and then activate it is going to result in you dealing less damage, but this skill is awesome regardless. The next skill is going to be Concussive Leap, and this one is absolutely fantastic, as you can use this skill to be able to dodge out of the way of any attacks, while still being able to flinch the enemies if you manage to hit them with the Concussive Blast. And if you don't press any direction, you will actually be able to jump up, which will make it easier for you to be able to climb onto enemies. And of course you can use this skill for traversal, which I used a lot, especially early on into Dragon's Dogma 2, which allowed me to overcome some obstacles and be able to open a chest that was hard to reach. It's a fantastic skill that I just don't end up using very often because the Thief has so many good skills. Up next we have Implicate or Ensnare, which quite simply throws a rope at an enemy, and in the case of smaller enemies you will pull them towards you, allowing you to then follow up with a critical attack when they are down. This is of course especially useful to take out harpies, so as a melee combatant, those flying enemies become a lot easier to deal with. Additionally, you can also use Implicate to be able to pull the enemies and knock them down, which is of course going to allow you to go to their weak spot and deal tons of damage. This in my opinion is a fantastic skill, especially if you have pawns in your party like a warrior that deals tons of knockdown damage, as once they knock an enemy off balance, you are able to instantly pull them down to the ground. Now the next skill is a very underrated one, it is Smoke Shroud. Quite simply, you can use a smoke bomb to blind enemies. A lot of people seem to believe that this skill is very similar to Shadow Veil, basically making it so that you are harder to detect. However, Smoke Shroud is very powerful because it makes it so that every single enemy that is within the area will become susceptible to getting hit by a critical attack. So you are able to easily dispatch smaller enemies in a single hit, and against larger enemies you will have a much easier time with. Once again, it's an awesome skill that I strongly recommend everyone to try. Up next we have Plunder, which is quite simply a way for you to be able to steal items from an enemy while still dealing some damage. And in the case of larger enemies, you will need to be climbing onto them to be able to use this. I don't like this a whole lot because I never found myself needing to farm upgrade materials, and you have so many better skills to use that I don't recommend you to use this. Up next we have Draw and Quarter. This is the Dire Gouge of Dragon's Dogma 1, a skill that you can only use whenever you are clinging onto an enemy that deals tons of damage. Sadly, in Dragon's Dogma 2, the skill will finish by throwing you off the monster, so you need to be careful about that. Still, it's a fantastic kit in Thief's arsenal, as it is a vocation that is very much oriented to being able to climb onto monsters, and especially if you have a warrior or a fighter in your party that is capable of throwing you onto monsters very easily, you'll be able to use this a lot more often and deal tons of damage. More often than not, whenever you use this on a monster's weak spot, they will actually be knocked down, which means you can easily follow it up by doing the same thing over again. And this skill is going to melt through bosses' HP, so definitely do not overlook this. Now the next skill is one of my favorites. It is Masterful Kill. It's essentially a parry that you can use to dodge out of the way of physical attacks, and you follow it up by doing a powerful attack that deals tons of damage and also looks amazing. And thankfully in Dragon's Dogma 2 you also get a different animation whenever you do this against large enemies that deals tons of damage and may actually result on you mounting the enemy afterwards. Keep in mind that you can only dodge melee attacks with this. You cannot use Masterful Kill against a Fire Breath, a magic spell, or even a ranged projectile. That being said, the Thief has a couple of Meister skills that you can unlock, which are extremely powerful and you can actually get them very early on your playthrough. To get these skills, simply start your journey in Vernworth and come all the way here to the Nameless Village. You will actually be told to come here on the main story, and there is going to be a tunnel that you can enter, and there you will find a couple of NPCs that will give you the Thief Meister skills as long as you are Thief rank 4 or higher. The first of these Meister skills is going to be Blades of the Pyre, a skill that is very similar to Ignited Blades, granting the fire element to your weapons but also creating a fire blast that deals a lot of damage. But as you can see from the preview, you also get burned whenever you do this. And sadly, being burned is not a positive in this game, unlike the first one, so you cannot use this to go up to an enemy and hug them to deal more damage. It's a pretty powerful skill, however, given its drawback, it's one that I cannot recommend. Unless of course that is, if you are using the Formless Feint Meister skill. This skill is absolutely nuts. Basically, whenever you use it, you enter a stance, similar to how Shadow Veil works, where you are constantly going to be draining stamina. However, you'll be able to automatically dodge any attack, and I really do mean anything. That includes a breath attack, ranged projectiles, magic spells, and even the Harpy songs. And as you will see later on with my build, you are easily capable of negating the drawback, so when stamina management becomes easy, this skill becomes insanely overpowered. Now let's go over the augments, because there are actually quite a few that you will want to rank up, even if you're going to end up playing some other vocations like the Warrior or even the Warfarer. Once you reach Thief rank 2, you will unlock Subtlety, which will decrease the likelihood of you being targeted, really emphasizing the assassin playstyle. At rank 4, you will gain Gratification, which will restore your HP whenever you deliver a killing blow. The amount of HP that you gain from this is going to be very little, so I don't think it is very worth it to run this augment. At rank 6, you will unlock Poise, which is going to reduce your stamina consumption whenever you are grabbed by an enemy. And at rank 8, you will gain Vigor, which is going to reduce your stamina consumption whenever you are climbing onto enemies. And given that Thief is such a good vocation for climbing onto enemies and dealing tons of damage, Vigor ends up becoming an augment that is quite good at letting you deal even more damage. And the final augment for the Thief is going to be Verve, which will quite simply augment your strength. So as you can see currently on my level 52 character, without any attack increases, I have a strength of 569. And by equipping the Verve augment, my strength goes up to 599. So even if you are planning on playing different vocations that are going to use strength such as Archer, Fighter, the Warrior, or even the Warfarer, then having the Verve augment is going to do you very well. Now let's go over my recommended equipment, augment, and skills for the Thief to make the best build possible and get the most out of this vocation. As I said before, Skill Splitter is a skill that I pretty much always like to run on my build, as it just deals tons of damage and you can always use it. As for the rest of my skills, I often go with Formless Feint because again it is such a powerful skill, being able to dodge everything, and we're going to be able to fix the stamina problem, so you really end up with no downside. And since I am using Formless Feint and I'm able to dodge anything, very often I will go with Blades of the Pyre because again I'm able to dodge the damage that I would take from this skill. Now an important note here is that sometimes Formless Feint doesn't quite become active whenever I perform the skill, which sometimes leads to me using Formless Feint and immediately using Blades of the Pyre after, and because I didn't get the invincibility buff, I end up getting hit, so that can get a bit annoying. And lastly, for my final skill, I like to go with Implicate or Smoke Shroud, with me taking Implicate more often whenever I have a warrior on my party that is focused on trying to knock down enemies as well, and Smoke Shroud being an all-around very powerful skill, although Concussive Leap would be my third option. However, if I know that I'm going to be doing a big boss right after, I will remove Blades off the Pyre and instead will go with Draw and Quarter, because again it deals so much damage. Now as for my augments, I like to go with a very specific setup. We are of course going to be going with Verve to increase our strength, and Vigor is going to help us out a lot with clinging on to monsters, so I always take this as well. If you are still doing a lot of exploration, and you are likely to pick up a lot of items, getting the through augment from the fighter to be able to carry additional weight can be a very good addition. And also getting metal from the fighter can be a very powerful augment, especially early on, because you won't have a lot of defense and this is going to help you out in those early game portions. Once you get better augments, I would swap out with, for example, endurance from the archer, which is going to increase your maximum stamina, which I believe is very powerful, and is going to combo especially well with Formless Feint. I think that taking this out and going with the exaltation from the mage is going to be much more beneficial, as it's going to augment your stamina recovery. Of course, it's not going to work if you are using Formless Feint, but it's going to allow you to recover much more stamina whenever you deactivate Formless Feint, so I do believe that it is very useful. But as you can see, my mage is not at max rank, so I don't have this augment yet. Now, as for my recommended equipment, I'm mostly going to be focusing on the ring and the weapons. There are a couple of very good options, and let's start with the rings. Of course, having a ring to boost your strength, letting you deal more damage, is always going to be nice. As you can see, my strength is currently at 612, and when I equip that strength ring, it goes up to 642. And by equipping 2 strength rings, it actually goes up to 672. That is a pretty big jump in damage, I would say. That being said, there are a few more rings that I would recommend you to use. Personally, I much prefer using the Ring of Momentum over having 2 Rings of Aggression, as I do believe that increasing my stamina is going to be more beneficial. As you can see, by equipping that ring, my stamina went up from 1324 to 1474. So a 150 stamina improvement can actually be very good. The Ring of Quickening is also a very good option, which will boost your stamina recovery speed, but I think you would be much better off getting this from the Mage Augment, because you only have a couple of ring slots after all. And finally, there is the Ring of Brawn, which is going to increase your strength the less weight you are carrying as your character. Now the thing about this ring is that the game doesn't show your strength going up whenever you equip this. I tested this with a bunch of weight categories, and the number on my strength never changed, and so I honestly don't know how good this ring is, and so until we get an actual number, I cannot recommend it. I personally don't care much about the armor, I mostly go for cosmetics, and I try to make my character look as cool as it can. Now as for the weapons, I'm using the Framae blades. They have a lot of strength and decent knockdown power, although you get them very late in the game. That being said, these daggers, despite, are ones that I used for a very long time. They are very good for the early game and also apply poison, and you can get them from the shop at the checkpoint town. Additionally, the Dowsing Spikes are the daggers that you can get from finding 50 Seeker tokens. And these ones are actually fantastic. They do a lot of damage and have a very high knockdown power. So if you are someone that likes to use Ensnare or Implicate, and even likes to use the impact augment from the warrior to more easily knock down enemies, this weapon might actually be my #1 recommendation. And it also has the added benefit of making a sound and glowing whenever you are near a treasure. And finally, the Crimson Tooth can be found by going all the way down into the volcanic island camp. Let me know if you would change anything about my build, and are you enjoying playing the Thief? I'll be making a video on my Warfarer, Trickster, and Mystic Spearhand builds next, so let me know which one you want to see first. With that being said, my name is Dark Hero, thank you all so much for watching, and as always, happy hunting!